On this week's edition of the NESN Patriots podcast, the Patriots lose again. They're 1-5 after dropping Sunday's game to the Las Vegas Raiders. We give our 2 up and 2 down, talk about Mac Jones and whether he did enough to keep his job, try and figure out what exactly the Patriots are doing with Malik Cunningham, go over their injury situation, talk about whether they could be sellers at the NFL trade deadline, and see if they have any chance at beating the Buffalo Bills next Sunday. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the NESN Patriots podcast. I'm Dakota Randall alongside Zach Cox. I am still in my hotel here in Las Vegas in the interesting but ultimately kind of bad Luxor Pyramid Hotel. I don't know about you, Zach. You've been in this hotel. I don't like this place. I don't know. Do you have any fond memories of it?
I mean, I don't love it, but your war with the Luxor for the last 3 weeks has been kind of hilarious. You're like, man, I'm dreading going to this place, this goddamn pyramid. I got to spend another 2 nights in here. It's convenient. It's right next to the stadium. It's kind of gross and dumpy, just like Las Vegas as a whole. But I don't know. I think we've stayed in worse out in Las Vegas. It's better than the Bally's that we were in for the training camp last year.
So that's no longer Bally's. It's now the Horseshoe at Las Vegas, interestingly enough.
You're an expert at this point. What was this? Three Vegas trips in just over a year for you?
Yeah, and it would be 4 if the Patriots make it back to the Super Bowl, which is most certainly probably not going to. But yeah, no, the reason why I ultimately hate this hotel is because last year when I stayed here for 5 days, there were 3 pizza boxes sitting in the hallway outside of my room for the entire time. They never got picked up. It's gross. But anyway, equally gross, the New England Patriots. I guess you could say signs of life in this game from the team as a whole and Mac Jones. I mean, that's obviously a stretch, but ultimately they lose 21-17. Again, same kind of story despite the whole starting over narrative. They got down 10-0 early. They trailed 13-3 going into halftime, trailed 19-10 early in the fourth quarter. Mac Jones had a bad pick. A lot of penalties, I think 10 total penalties, 9 that were accepted. Offensive line horrendous again. Just a lot of the same stuff that we've been seeing. Injuries popped up. At the end, the Patriots had a chance to win this game. They got the ball back with over 2 minutes left, trailing by 2. We had the door was open for a game-winning drive by Mac Jones, which would have been an interesting end to the week that started with talk of him losing his job. There was a lot that went on in this game, but at the end of the day, the Patriots are 1-5 for the first time since 1995. I guess, Zach, before we get into it, just any overarching takeaways from this game, because it was a mess, some encouraging things, but ultimately more of the same.
I mean, yeah, there were signs of life. There were encouraging things. There was improvement, but it just it's indicative of where the Patriots are as a franchise right now, that a game in which you score 17 points and lose to Brian Hoyer is a positive sign and a step in the right direction. I mean, they didn't get blown out.
I should have mentioned from the top that they lost to Brian Hoyer. That probably should be the headline here, that the Patriots, who I don't know what the number is, it feels like 10 out of their last 11 wins are either against backups or Zach Wilson, and then 1 against Jared Goff. Now they can't even do that. Now they can't even beat the Brian Hoyers of the world.
Yeah, Brian Hoyer replaced Jimmy Garoppolo at halftime, played the whole second half, actually looked pretty good for the Raiders. And yeah, the Patriots didn't get blown up by 30 points like they did in the last 2 weeks. Mac Jones only had 1 egregious turnover rather than several, which, again, baby steps in the right direction. He wasn't benched in this game. And the Patriots did have a chance to win at the end, but they are what their record says they are. They're a bad team. They're 1-5, as you mentioned, first time since 1995. That was I believe year 3 of the Bill Parcells era, year 2 or year 3. And the majority of the Patriots' current roster wasn't even born the last time that they were sitting in this current spot. You got the Bills coming up this weekend. You got to go to Miami next weekend. 1-7 is a very, very real possibility. And it's similar to what we said last week. Even after some encouragement here, there's really nothing that you can look at and say, okay, the Patriots clean up these 2 things, they'll be right back in the mix. There's just so many issues for this team, not even counting the, 2 dozen injuries they're now dealing with. They're in a bad spot, and there's really no path forward that I can see.
Yeah, I think while you could make an argument that they were an inch away from beating the Philadelphia Eagles in week 1 with that Kayshon Boutte non-catch, you could say that they are an inch away from being 0-6 if Randall Cobb had caught that Hail Mary, which you say like, yeah, it's a Hail Mary, like it was a low percentage play anyway. But and not to go back a few weeks, but we went over it. The Patriots kind of invited that by playing ultra conservative in the second half and playing scared, and they almost lost that game. And again, so if Randall Cobb catches that ball, the Patriots are 0-6. I mean, as it stands right now, they're 1-5. If the season ended today, they'd have, I think, the number 4 pick in the NFL draft. So, that's a whole different other conversation. It kind of depends on who finishes with the top pick and if that team wants a quarterback. I think most of the teams in that conversation will want a quarterback. The wild card is the Chicago Bears. If they are okay with Justin Fields, maybe they trade that pick. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. But it is a real conversation at this point. We have a lot to kind of get into here in a short amount of time before I go to the Vegas airport, which also stinks. But real quick, I just want to go over our 2 up, 2 down from this game. I'll start with you, Zach. What are your 2 up?
One of my ups, Ezekiel Elliott. One of those silver linings, signs of life from the Patriots is that they actually ran the ball pretty well in the second half. I thought the run blocking was a lot better. Some of the kind of scheme type things were definitely improved in the second half. And Elliott had another productive game. Overall, he's been pretty solid for the Patriots this season. He scored his first touchdown. He averaged, 4.9 yards per carry on 7 attempts. Would have had a 75-yard swing pass touchdown that ended up getting called back for a Hunter Henry holding call. Overall, it was an encouraging showing from Elliott rather, and Ramondre Stevenson also ran the ball pretty well in his limited playing time. He suffered an injury, left the game, came back. Overall, if you're looking for something that the Patriots did well in this game offensively, they were able to get the running game going a little bit in the second half, which has really been a problem for them all season. And my other up, Jabril Peppers, and the hit that he put on Davante Adams was
awesome.
It was awesome. I mean, it's the kind of hit that you don't really see in the NFL these days. It almost reminded me of that famous Reggie Bush hit back in the playoffs in 2004 or whenever that was, when he got laid out by Sheldon Brown. Not quite on that level, but pretty close. That's what Peppers brings to this defense. It's gotten him in trouble a couple of times because he's been fined 3 or 4 times in his career. But that's the kind of physicality and playmaking that the Patriots need on defense. It forced their first turnover since week 2. And the Patriots defense overall in this game, I think they have to be reasonably pleased with the way they performed, given some of the personnel losses that they had. Only allowed 1 touchdown. Raiders went 1 for 6 in the red zone. Davante Adams, 2 catches for 29 yards on 5 targets. Certainly not perfect by that defense, but definitely was not the reason that they lost. And Peppers delivered easily the contribution from that group.
Yeah, that was an awesome play. That was, and it was kind of being in the stadium too. We've talked about it before. There's an open press. It's an open press box in Vegas, so you can hear the crowd. I mean, the entire crowd. And Matt reacted immediately.
It was such a clean hit too. It was just like perfectly timed. There was no kind of helmet to helmet question, anything like that. It was just he got jacked up, as they used to say. But yeah, that was fun to see.
That's got to be like the dream scenario for a player like Jabril Peppers, because not only to like lay down a hit like that, but also against maybe the second best receiver in football. Yep. That was awesome. For me, I'm gonna do Jelani Tavai. No, it's not a sexy choice, but I actually think, I think his last 2 games, not including this one, but against the Cowboys and the Saints. I mean, if you were searching for a positive in those games, which were hard to come by, I think his play was one of them. I think they were 2 of his best games since joining the Patriots. I think at the end of the day, the fact that Jelani Tavai plays as much as he does is not good for the Patriots. You want more speed and playmaking ability at that spot. But I think at the end of the day, he's turned into a very solid and slightly better than that player for the Patriots. And I think he was good again in this game. He finished with 7 tackles, which I think tied with the Peppers for the team lead. He had that bad unnecessary roughness penalty in the first quarter, but he made up for it by corralling the interception right afterwards. So I just think overall, he's been good this season, and this was another one of his better games. And also Kendrick Bourne, I think it speaks for itself. He finished with 10 catches on 11 targets for 89 yards. Played really big in the fourth quarter when the Patriots were trying to mount that comeback. we've said it a lot. He's, one of, if not the only receivers, on the offense who's able to get open and make plays on a consistent basis. It's just a shame that he, makes so many mental errors, whether it's running the wrong route or some of these pre-snap penalties that at times limits his playing time. But when everything's clicking for him and his head's in the game, he can be a dangerous player for the Patriots. And he played really well in this game. So I think, he was an easy choice for me. I did have Ezekiel Elliott in my post-game story until Kendrick Bourne kind of erupted there at the end of the game. But moving on now. Sorry.
Just quickly on Bourne, he basically carried the Patriots passing game in this game. He had 10 of Mac Jones' 24 completions went to Kendrick Bourne. I believe he touched the ball 7 times on the Patriots' second touchdown drive. And basically every other Patriots receiver that played in this game did next to nothing, which I'm sure we'll get into right now.
Yeah. So, why don't you I'll get to my 2 down in a second. Why don't you just do yours first?
I might as well start with you, since I think we're going Devontae Parker right off the top here.
Okay. Yeah. Devontae Parker for me. I think, listen, he's fine. Sometimes he makes good plays. But at the end of the day, he was brought here by the Patriots to be their downfield threat, win these 50-50 balls, pick up big chunks of yards on these long passes down the field. And sometimes he's delivered, but more often than not, it's what you saw last night, which is the ball clangs off his hands in a big spot. Listen, that play should have been completed on the Patriots' final drive, and they were backed up in their end zone. I think it would have given the Patriots the ball right around the Vegas 45-yard line. Knowing the Patriots, they would have gone down there and gone holding, false start, backed up to the, beyond the 50-yard line, and then Chad Ryland would have missed a 60-yard field goal. But there also was a path for starting at the 45, picking up another first down, bleeding the clock, and then probably getting what I would consider the best win of Mac Jones' career when you just consider all the factors in play this week, the pressure he's been under. And all he had to do was catch the ball, and it hit him right in the hands, and he didn't get it. He finished with 1 catch on 3 targets for 7 yards. In a game where you didn't have Demario Douglas, where you didn't have Juju Smith-Schuster, where you're forced to play Jalen Reagor and Malik Cunningham at receiver, you need more from Devontae Parker against a bad Raider secondary that was without its best cornerback in Nate Hobbs. And you just got absolutely nothing from him. That decision in the offseason to extend him and then not pay DeAndre Hopkins, along obviously with the Jacoby Myers, Juju Smith-Schuster swap. It just continues to look terrible. I think you can make a strong case that if the Patriots had Jacoby Myers and DeAndre Hopkins and not Juju Smith-Schuster and Devontae Parker, they probably win one of those first 2 games. And then, you're 2-1 going into the Dallas game. Maybe you're not a mental house of cards at that point, and who knows? You're still a flawed team, but you never know how things go at that point. And I just think Devontae Parker hasn't given them anything. And I also think he showed no accountability after this game. He just kind of had a tense exchange with reporters. He said things like, yeah, I could hit my fingertips, or, he had a next response to one of the questions. And it was hard to not compare the way he reacted to that to the way that Jacoby Myers handled questions about the lateral a year ago in Vegas when, tears in his eyes, a totally disastrous play, and he took full accountability and responsibility. And, the Patriots didn't want to pay that guy. They wanted to pay Devontae Parker, and he's neither delivering nor showing any leadership. So I think he was a clear down in this game.
Well, I think, there was also the play earlier in the game, the 3rd and 5, where it wasn't exactly clear what was happening there, but it looked like he just kind of ran a slow, like maybe lazy route. Maybe he and Mac Jones just weren't on the same page, but it was a play that had no chance. The pass ended up being way behind him. And overall this season, Juju Smith-Schuster has caught the most heat for his receiver struggles, justifiably so. But Devontae Parker also has essentially been a non-factor ever since his first game this season. He missed week 1. Had a solid game in week 2 against Miami. He had 6 catches, 57 yards. But since then, these are his stat lines over the last 4 games. 2 catches, 19 yards, 2 catches, 33 yards, 2 catches, 20 yards, and 1 catch, 7 yards last night. Again, as you mentioned, this is a guy that the Patriots gave a contract extension to right before the season, a guy that they're relying on to be that downfield threat. And he just hasn't been. He hasn't really brought anything to this offense of late. And especially in a game like that against the Raiders where you need him, you're down Juju Smith-Schuster, you're down Demario Douglas. Kendrick Bourne was the only member of that group that stepped up and showed kind of any life.
Yeah, and the thing is too, he's not able to do anything. I mean, remember when he was the guy who the one guy who Stephon Gilmore couldn't defend.
Yeah.
And I remember if I remember right in those games, I mean that wasn't like it was a bunch of downfield 50-50 balls. It was a lot of slants and intermediate stuff that he was just picking Stephon Gilmore apart.
There needs to be a 30 for 30 made about that game at some point, because that was the final game, or the final regular season game of the Tom Brady era. Ryan Fitzpatrick beats the Patriots as like a 17-point underdog. And Stephon Gilmore was Defensive Player of the Year that year, and he gave up, I think, like 10 catches for 120 yards to Devontae Parker. And we've really never seen that Parker again. He's shown it in flashes. He's had a couple half-decent games for the Patriots, some productive ones last year. But yeah, it's just that kind of player has not materialized at all for the Patriots this season.
Yeah, and I don't think it's an injury thing or a lack of burst, because I think he was basically the same player at that time in Miami. Just couldn't get much separation, but he was running a more diverse route tree, if you want to call it that, at that time. But here with the Patriots, he neither can haul in those deep 50-50 balls, and he can't do any of the intermediate stuff that we were just talking about with that slant. I mean, he's a nothing.
It's been his game his entire career. He's a guy that never creates separation. He always ranks near the bottom of the NFL in that stat. But he traditionally has been one of the best in the NFL at creating those contested catches and winning in those 50-50 situations. I can't remember if it was this summer or last summer, where he's like, he said, I don't consider them 50-50 balls. I consider them 80-20 balls because I win so many of them. That has not been the case at all so far this season.
No. Okay, so quickly moving on. Vidarian Lowe is my other one. I mean, geez, some of the worst right tackle play I've ever seen out of a Patriots player. I mean, the first
for like
game,
a month straight now too.
It's a complete disaster. I remember the first game he played at left tackle. I was like, wow, there's your right tackle.
He was solid, yeah.
And it's just been terrible. I mean, he was awful again in this game. He had a penalty. He gave up pressure. I mean, Max Crosby looked like. I mean, Max Crosby is a great player, but he just completely destroyed Vidarian Lowe in this game. And then, of course, he was at fault. Well, him and Mike Gesicki at fault on the final play there when Mac Jones took the safety, where he blew right by both of those guys. I mean, I don't know if the Patriots have a better option at this point with Riley Reif being hurt and Calvin Anderson. Either just still not really back from whatever happened to him during the summer, or just ineffective. But I mean, Vidarian Lowe has been absolutely awful at right tackle, and it cost the Patriots in this game.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same stuff we've been saying for the last couple of weeks. I'm not going to beat the dead horse too much, but it goes back to the biggest problem with this Patriots offseason. They did not address the right tackle position comprehensively at all. I mean, they tried to patch it with just a couple of mid to low level free agent signings, then made a couple of late trades for two guys that basically had no NFL experience coming in. And you're seeing the result of that now. I mean, I have to imagine if the Patriots believed they had any better option, Vidarian Lowe would not have started the last, 4 games at right tackle for the Patriots. He struggled in every one of them. I'm curious whether Riley Reif would have been an option there if he was healthy for this game. I know he only played at guard a week ago in his first game back from injured reserve, but you got to imagine he can't be worse than what the Patriots are getting right now. Who knows how serious that Reif injury is, whether that's something that's going to land him on injured reserve or if he'll be able to play this week. But it's still the biggest hole on the Patriots roster. It's been that way since the start of last season, and it's single-handedly derailing their entire offense. I think obviously it's not the only problem for their offense. They've got weak spots elsewhere, but it's been the one glaring weakness that they just haven't addressed.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say about this is, obviously the Patriots didn't address the right tackle in the offseason, and then it got to the point where right before the start of the season, they had to pull 2 trades at the 11th hour to try and fix the problem. One was Tyrone Wheatley Jr., who seems like an intriguing prospect. A lot of people who know more about offensive line play than me really seem to like his film, but healthy scratch in each of the first 4 games or 5 games, whatever it is. And then now he's on injured reserve with a knee issue. So he's going to give you nothing. And then the other one, Vidarian Lowe, who's been terrible. So not very good. But Zach, who are your 2 downs?
One of my other downs was Antonio Mafi, rookie guard. I know the Patriots like his makeup, like his potential. I do too. I think he has the potential to be a good player, but He's had to play a lot this season with injuries to Mike Owenu and Cole Strange, and he's just really struggled. He struggled in this game. He had the holding penalty on the final drive that backed the Patriots up toward their own goal line. He allowed a sack earlier in a game on a stunt that he wasn't able to pick up. The Patriots offensive line as a whole just continues to be a problem for this team. David Andrews was the only member of that O-line that didn't commit a penalty in this game. And Andrews and Trent Brown were the only people in that starting five who were kind of guys that you want in that role, ideal starters. The Patriots were down to rookie backups at both guard spots, and then obviously Vidarian Lowe over on the right side. It's just a bad situation, and it goes back to the point earlier. I don't really know what they can do to fix that. They got to get guys healthy, or I guess bring somebody in, but they're not really at the state right now as a team to be kind of buying at the trade deadline and trying to patch those holes with trade acquisitions. So continues to be a problem there up front. And then my other down was I didn't really know who to assign this to, so it's just got to be Bill Belichick. I mean, the penalty issues you mentioned off the top.
It's 11, by the way. It was 11, not 10. 11
yes,
penalties.
It was 11 penalties. 10 of them were accepted. I got to find the exact numbers for this because they were basically almost all concentrated in the first 10 minutes of the game and the final couple of minutes of the fourth quarter.
In the biggest moments.
Yes, in the biggest moments. I've got to get the. So they were called 10 penalties in the game. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I consider the beginning of the game a big moment just because of the pressure for them to get out to a good start. So you're right. Beginning of the game and then the ending of the game, all the penalties.
Yeah, first 11 minutes of the game, 2 penalties on offense, 2 penalties on defense, 1 penalty on special teams. That Sam Roberts penalty that extended the Raiders' first drive, and then 5 more penalties in the final 5 minutes, including that J.C. Jackson pass interference that he did not believe was a call. I think that was a kind of dubious call, but that one was costly because it forced the Patriots to use their final 3 timeouts. They didn't have any when they got the ball back for that final drive. And then the 1 penalty in between those points was the Hunter Henry holding call that I mentioned earlier that wiped out what would have been the Patriots' longest touchdown of the season. These used to be uncharacteristic mistakes for a Patriots team. You used to come out of a game like this and be like, man, you don't see that a lot from a Bill Belichick coach team. That's not the case anymore. The Patriots have been doing this kind of thing for years now, it seems. Their discipline in the last several seasons just has not been at the level that it was for the height of their dynasty era. And when you're a team that, as we've mentioned many times, is lacking in high-end talent and is now dealing with a million injuries, you've got to at least play smart football. You've got to have the discipline. You can't beat yourself with penalties. And the Patriots just routinely do that kind of thing. Teddy Bruschi had some strong words about this on ESPN this morning. He said, pointed to these penalties, and he said, it just seems like Bill Belichick's message isn't getting through to the players for whatever reason. And whenever you hear something like that from a former Patriots player, a Patriots great, that certainly makes you kind of your ears perk up and listen a little bit. Just something is wrong behind the scenes for the Patriots, that they're just making these kind of errors that they cannot make, and they're making them seemingly every single game. Yeah.
And I would also add, I just think the Patriots didn't look like they were ready to go in this game, which to me, a must-win game, obviously, season on the line. Maybe they really are just letting go of the rope a little bit, but the Raiders drive down the field and chew up like 9 minutes on the clock. Like we said, 3 penalties on that drive. And I mean, that Raiders drive probably should have ended in a touchdown, because after the Sam Roberts penalty, I forget who it was, the backup running back, whoever, had a drop for the Raiders on 3rd down that probably would have been a touchdown. The Raiders going into this game hadn't scored more than 18 points. They scored 21 in this game, should have been 24 with that touchdown. So I just think generally the Patriots didn't look ready to go in this game. They were sloppy, they were undisciplined, and that, as it always does, needs to fall on the head coach. Not good. I don't really know what else to say about it. It was just, I don't think Bill Belichick's going to lose his job during the midseason. I just can't see that happening. I can't see him getting the firing treatment. But like you mentioned, what Teddy Bruschi said this morning and what he said yesterday about how, he wants Bill Belichick to retire. I mean, and obviously the situation with Gerard Mayo, him being a clear head coach in waiting. I don't know. As we get further into this, it feels more and more like we might be in the final days of the Bill Belichick era, which is both sad, just because you wouldn't want it to end this way, for a coach of that pedigree. But it is what it is. Maybe they can turn it around. Okay, let's try and get through these other segments here a little more quickly, so I don't miss my flight. Mac Jones, obviously the big talk going into the week. He reportedly was on a short leash. That short leash was tested when he threw that awful interception in the first half. But I think overall, if you take out that interception, which I know you can't, and it was a bad pick, and then they do happen. I think overall he had a decent game. I would say he actually played well. If you just look at the entire body of work, he finished 24 of 33 for 200 yards and the one interception. But in the second half, he was 16 of 19 for 103 yards. And in the fourth quarter, again, when the Patriots were trailing 19-10, he was 11 of 13 for 69 yards. So kind of the full Mac Jones experience, like has a boneheaded play, factored into the Patriots getting out to a slow start. He didn't have anybody getting open really on a consistent basis besides Bourne. The pressure was horrible, so you don't know how much blame you want to put on him for how bad the offense looked in the first half. But then in the second half, with his job absolutely on the line and with the season on the line, he played some of his best football of the season and I think showed a lot of toughness. And then, of course, fittingly, it ends with a play with the safety where, maybe you say he has to get rid of the ball, but it also happened so fast that you kind of just blame anybody. Another play where you could go either way. But overall, Zach, I think he did enough to keep his job. One, by default, because they don't have any better options, but two, just in general, I think he played well enough in this game where he deserves to keep his job for another.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the fact that he had that turnover, which was very bad, it was similar to the interceptions that we saw him throw against the Cowboys and the Saints. The fact that he didn't allow that to kind of derail his entire afternoon like he did in the previous 2 weeks, I think that was, again, positive step forward. Overall, this was a solid game from Mac Jones. It would have looked even better if Devontae Parker was able to pull down that deep ball at the end of the game. He did have one scare. I think it was right before Ramondre Stevenson's touchdown where he basically threw a pass directly to a Raiders linebacker that Ty Montgomery was able to catch and kind of bail him out on that. But overall, I think you saw a steadier game from Mac Jones. Bill O'Brien was able to help him, I think, with some of the quick game type stuff that he implemented in that second half. I believe I saw that Mac's time to throw in this game was his lowest of the season. So he wasn't kind of standing back there in the pocket waiting for bad things to happen. And you touched on it. The Patriots just don't have any better options. If they had a better option, Mac Jones probably wouldn't have started this game. And they certainly wouldn't have gone into this game with their only other two real NFL quarterbacks unavailable. The short leash report was strange. I mean, it made sense in the moment, but then you saw how the Patriots handled their depth chart in the game. So if Mac Jones was on a short leash, that meant the Patriots were willing to bench him and just have Malik Cunningham run their entire offense. I don't think I mean, that would have been a major surprise to me, just based on where Cunningham seems to be in his development and the fact that he hardly saw the field in this game. Bailey Zappi was the emergency third quarterback, so he could have only played if Jones and Cunningham were both hurt, and Will Grier was just flat out inactive for this game. I think if Zappi or Grier, if the Patriots had any faith that they might be an upgrade, they would have at least either started this game or at the very least been the primary backup and kind of given Jones the hook as soon at the first sign of trouble. That's not the case. It's clear that the Patriots believe he's still their best option. And I agree at this point. I mean, if he has another 3 or 4 turnover game, then you got to go somewhere else. You got to try something different. But if you can get this level of play from Mac Jones, I don't think the Patriots are going to get better from anybody on their roster.
Yeah, I would agree. And I would just, to try and craft further defensive Mac Jones, and you could play this game with every single quarterback every week. But let's just if that played Ezekiel Elliott, the 74-yard touchdown had stood, which it should have. I mean, Hunter Henry did not need to make that hold. That hold did not impact, I don't think would have impacted the play. It was just a bad penalty. And then if Devontae Parker catches that ball, and let's say the Patriots pick up some, a few more yards to go down to a field goal, I mean, Mac Jones probably would have had, I think over 300 yards and a touchdown, and arguably his first real game-winning drive and best win of his career. So, I wouldn't normally make that case just because there's so much other context to a game. But I think those are two plays that, if they didn't happen, and they weren't his fault, you're talking about a much different game. So I do think he played well in this game. But overall, like you said, if they had a better option, they probably would have gone to it by this point. But they don't. But sticking in that sort of on that lane, and you kind of alluded to it, where I kind of don't buy the short leash report, because I don't think there really was any scenario outside of complete catastrophic disaster like the previous 2 weeks that would have had the Patriots go to Malik Cunningham as the full-time quarterback in this game. But he was the Patriots' top backup quarterback, with Bailey Zappi being the emergency third QB and Will Greer being inactive. Pretty stunning development for me. He was signed to the 53-man roster on Saturday. The tea leaves throughout the week kind of pointed in this direction, where it at least seemed like he was going to be a practice squad elevation. At the end of the day, he saw 6 snaps, didn't register a carry or a single pass. He did flex out wide on the Ezekiel Elliott direct snap Wildcat touchdown, took a sack. There was no Malik mania in this game. I have a sort of breakdown that I want to get into about why the way the Patriots planned for Malik Cunningham throughout the week and what they did on game day, to me, didn't make a whole lot of sense. But Zach, just real quick, I know you wrote about it earlier after going back and watching Cunningham's 6 snaps. What did you make of how he was used in this game?
Yeah, it was rather uneventful. I would say, as you mentioned, only 6 snaps, didn't carry the ball, had 1 handoff, took 1 sack, didn't attempt a pass, wasn't targeted in the passing game on the 3, I believe, snaps he played at wide receiver. Belichick said this morning, it kind of alluded that they wanted to see him out there a little bit more. Maybe there was just a game script type situation where they were trailing by more than they wanted to, and they didn't think that it was the right time to deploy him out there. But I don't know. It was for them to sign him to the 53-man roster rather than just calling him up from the practice squad for one day. They clearly have some sort of plan for him. I was very, very surprised, borderline shocked to see that he was the primary backup in this game. I just don't. I know a lot of Patriots fans want to say, "Hey, who cares? Screw it, start Malik. Like he's not going to do any worse." I don't think that I can't see that happening at this point for a variety of reasons. But even the way that Bill Belichick talks about him, maybe it's kind of some subterfuge and he's trying to throw people off the scent. But he always compliments Malik Cunningham's improvement as a receiver and as a special teamer. And then he's like, yeah, he also takes some reps at quarterback. Like last week, he called him competent as a quarterback, which is not exactly a glowing endorsement compared to what he was saying about his work in other areas. I don't know. He's a fun player. I hope we see more of him during the final 11 weeks of this season, just because he does have the potential to add some spice to this offense and add a spark in kind of a gadget play situational role. But to me, he doesn't look like somebody who is anywhere near ready to kind of take the reins as QB1 here. Yeah,
and for the record, I added Malik Cunningham in fantasy football solely because.
Didn't you just write a story about why you shouldn't add him in fantasy football?
Well, yeah, that's part of it. 40 chest, Zach, 40 chest. I did it solely because, hey, it's more of an indictment on my team because I don't have a backup quarterback. But if he gets redesignated as a receiver, and then he becomes sort of like a Taysom Hill option in fantasy, where who knows? But I think him being the top quarterback in this game, to me, really more than anything, it says less about Malik Cunningham and more about Bailey Zappi. That the Patriots basically had absolutely zero interest in Bailey Zappi playing in this game. So, to me, the Zappi fever is completely over. The vaccine worked to quell the fever. And I just think because the Patriots made Malik Cunningham their backup quarterback, but they didn't really even treat him like a backup quarterback during the week, before the game, during warmups, or actually during the game after kickoff. Myself and Doug Hyde over at the Boston Herald talked with Cunningham after this game, and he said that he found out that he was going to be signed to the 53-man roster and serve as the backup quarterback on Tuesday. He knew that back then, which kind of makes all the sort of teasing reporting throughout the week kind of funny in hindsight. But he knew Tuesday, and yet we asked him if he spent more time in the quarterback room this week, and he said no. He didn't spend any more time than normal in the quarterback room. He said they put more work on his plate and they had more to digest this week than they normally would, but there was not any sort of uptick in actual time in the QB room. And then during warmups, you kind of have those two sections of warmups where kind of an informal warmup where guys are on the field just kind of getting loose, and then the full team warmup afterward. During that first period, Malik Cunningham was out there and was just generally getting loose, but he wasn't doing anything that made him look like a quarterback. And then he was just kind of playing catch. And he was playing catch with Bailey Zappi at one point. And then when he came back out for the full squad warm-ups, he was not, it was as it is every week, but Mac Jones, Bailey Zappi at midfield, taking all of the quarterback reps. Malik Cunningham was just kind of running around, catching passes, doing some receiver stuff. And then it was funny. At one point, assistant quarterbacks coach Evan Rothstein kind of went up to him and sort of made a motion like, you can go throw. It's okay. You can go throw. And they both kind of laughed. And then he threw a little bit. But then the rest of warmups, he ran routes with the receivers. He stretched with the receivers. And then when the Patriots split up into do sort of the simulated offense there towards the end of warmups, it was all Mac Jones getting the quarterback reps. No Bailey Zappi and no Malik Cunningham. He was all at receiver. And then we talked to him after the game and said about that whole situation during warmups. And he said that he was getting loose in the locker room, that he was doing his quarterback warmup in the locker room because the Patriots wanted to keep things low key, almost like they wanted to hide it from the Raiders. And it was
top secret.
Yeah, top secret, which, okay, then why are you leaking things to Ian Rappaport and Jeff Howe throughout the week? It's not a secret. We saw you sign him on Saturday. Like we know what's coming. And
he was the backup quarterback. Like nobody else could have come in and played quarterback.
Right. But he said they wanted to keep things low key. And then when Doug asked, who were you throwing to? Or were you in the hallway? Were you in the locker room? Where were you throwing to? He kind of paused. And I think he kind of didn't want to reveal anything or realize he shouldn't have said anything. And he was like, no, I was just kind of working on my shoulder, like stretching out my shoulder, getting work on it. And then I went out and played pass or played catch and did quarterback stuff in warmups, which he didn't actually do. So the whole thing to me doesn't make any sense. He found out he was going to be the backup quarterback Tuesday. He didn't really work with the quarterbacks in the meeting rooms. Yes, he reportedly saw more snaps during practice, but then on warmups, he didn't do anything quarterback related. The Patriots are trying to get cute, apparently, with hiding him, stretching him out in the locker room. I just think the whole thing doesn't make any sense. And then it fell apart on game day where maybe they did have a package, and it just fell apart because there was no protection. But ultimately, it led to him making no real impact on this game.
Also, random side note quickly, what about those Will Grier reports that we saw last week? There are multiple outlets that reported that there was a good chance that Will Grier was going to be the Patriots' primary backup quarterback in this game over Bailey Zappi. And Will Grier ended up being fourth on the depth chart, was in street clothes, was not even active for this game. So just some strange happenings with the Patriots quarterback depth chart. And Bill Belichick said this morning, basically said nothing about it this morning. He said we're still focused on last night, haven't thought about next week yet. So we do not know what it's going to look like this Sunday against Buffalo, whether there'll be any more kind of maneuvering. But yeah, it's just an odd situation overall.
Spooky stuff in Vegas. It seems to always in and around games at that stadium or going out there. The Patriots just kind of lose their heads.
Place is cursed.
Yeah, the place is cursed. All right, quick couple more segments here. Just want to go into the list of injuries. The Patriots went into this game comically banged up. The situation got even worse where, and let me know if I missed anybody, Jonathan Jones, Keon White, Ramondre Stevenson, Hunter Henry, and Josh Uche all suffered injuries. I think Ramondre Stevenson was the only one who came back into the game.
John Jones came back in as well.
He did come back in?
He came back. It was Keon White, Uche, and Henry suffered injuries and didn't return. Stevenson and Jones spent some time on the sideline and were able to come back and finish the game.
Okay, I must have been buried in my laptop when John Jones came back in the game. But either way, and I was surprised he came back because when he was walking off the field, he did not look good. I thought it was like a hamstring because he was reaching for the back by the hamstring and he couldn't even bend his leg. But then he looked better going to the locker room and he came back in. But regardless, the Patriots injury situation is getting kind of ridiculous. It's not getting kind of ridiculous. It is ridiculous. I'll just take a deep breath and go through the full list that we're at right now. It'll take me a second, but I think it just sort of illustrates where they're at. On full season injured reserve out for the season, Isaiah Bolden, Raekwon McMillan, Trey Nixon. In-season injured reserve, meaning they can return. Matthew Judon, Christian Gonzalez, Jack Jones, Marcus Jones, Tyron Wheatley Jr., Daniel Aquale. A couple of those guys, Gonzalez and Aquale, probably done for the season. On PUP and can return, Trey Flowers, Cody Davis. Maybe they come back this week. We'll see. Players who are questionable for week 6, so they weren't so bad that they were ruled out, but they're dealing with something. Christian Barmore, Trent Brown, Kyle Duggar, Devon Godchaux, Jonathan Jones, Mike Nwenu, who did not play in this game, and afterward, Bill Belichick said he only would have played in case of emergency, so he is really banged up. Tyquan Thornton, Josh Uche, Sean Wade. Players who were already ruled out for the game: Demario Douglas, Juju Smith-Schuster, Cole Strange, Riley Reif, and then the guys we mentioned who got hurt in this game: Keon White, Jonathan Jones, Stevenson, Hunter Henry, Josh Uche. I don't want to make excuses for the Patriots, Zach, but when you are that banged up, it doesn't help matters, and I think it absolutely has played a role in where they are at this point.
And it's not just kind of like bottom of the roster randos that are getting hurt. This is the majority of the players on that list are key players, like very important and very good Patriots players. If you're talking about Judon, Gonzalez, Jack Jones, Uche now, Keon White, Hunter Henry, Juju Smith-Schuster, who should be the Patriots' top receiver, even if he's not. Demario Douglas, who's been their most exciting offensive player. Cole Strange and Nwenu, their starting guards, have been banged up all season. Reif has only played in one game. It's Marcus Jones, their top return man, and a guy that was expected to be their top slot corner. It's just they've just been hammered by injuries on both sides of the ball. All three, if you include Jones, his punt return and kick return abilities. It's difficult to. As I mentioned earlier, this was a team that didn't really have many blue chip, like Pro Bowl star level players even going into the year. You'd probably say Judon is the only one who's on that level league wide. And maybe Christian Gonzalez was creeping up toward that territory before he got hurt. Now both of those guys are unavailable. Stevenson's banged up. He's one of their better players. It's tough when you're injured, when you're talent deficient, injured, and continuously making dumb penalties and turnovers and sloppy football. Patriots are doing all three of those things right now. And when you look at it just kind of on its face, it's not surprising that their record is what it is when you combine all those factors together.
Yeah. And you can go back to week 1, too, and looking at guys who, are playing now, but weren't playing in that game, the difference that could have made. I know I just dumped on Devontae Parker, but he probably makes that catch that Kayshon Boutte didn't make. Trent Brown did not play in that game. That game was on the razor's edge. Maybe the Patriots win if those guys are in it. Tyquan Thornton also missed that game and the 3 after that. So just across the board, I think injuries have been a real factor for the Patriots this season. And I think what were you going to say?
I was going to say offensive line too. We're 6 weeks into the season. We've already seen 5 starting O-line combinations and at least 3 additional combinations in game. So the Patriots have used more different offensive lines than games played this season, which I think certainly is a very large factor into why they're struggling so badly up front.
Yeah, and I think going forward, the biggest one could be. I think Christian Gonzalez at the end of the day probably is the biggest one, just because they're so thin at cornerback. But Matthew Judon obviously is a big loss, and I think that pops up in this game where, the Patriots needed to generate pressure against either Jimmy Garoppolo or Brian Hoyer to force them into bad turnovers. This is the kind of game where the Patriots they got 1 turnover, but they really needed a second to kind of flip the game. And without Matthew Judon out there, and with Josh Uche having a very disappointing contract year and dealing with an injury, they're just not able to generate enough consistent pressure to force those quarterbacks into those kind of mistakes. Keon White getting hurt in this game too. So, I think the Judon one really is going to hurt them. If they're not, I think they're going to have issues covering all year without Gonzalez. And if they're not able to replace the pass rushing from Judon, it's just going to make it even worse.
Yeah, rains it pours kind of situation there. When you see Judon get hurt, you'd say, okay, two of the people that need to step up the most are Keon White and Josh Uche. Both of those guys now dealing with injuries as well, weren't able to finish the game the other day. It's just their depth is just really being tested right now, and they don't have the level of playmaker at those lower levels of the depth chart, which you would kind of expect because they're guys that were already playing bigger roles than you thought they would.
Yeah, and it goes back to drafting too. I mean, I think this is the kind of situation where this isn't a podcast where I thought I'd bring up Ronnie Perkins, but nevertheless, that was a third-round pick and a guy that I think was hopefully going to develop into a real pass rushing force, and maybe a situation where he would take off. But he, now what is he in Denver, Indianapolis?
Yeah, played a lot on Thursday night the other day. I was watching that game. I was like, oh yeah, it's Ronnie Perkins. All right.
Oh, I can't stay up that late to watch that. Yeah, so
that's at 8 p.m.
Yeah, but I will say I think Anthony Jennings has played well.
Yes.
I mean, he's not generating much pass rush, but in terms of setting the edge in the run game, I think he's played well for the Patriots. Okay,
it's a good Barmore game too. This is one of the better games I've seen from him. Yeah,
I would agree with that. One of his better games. Okay, should the Patriots sell at the deadline? They're 1-5, almost certainly not going to make the playoffs. Real chance they're 1-7 going into that Commanders game. Commanders are okay. I mean, I think it could be 1-8 after that game. I don't think they're going to tank. It's a stupid conversation to have. That's not what Bill Belichick's going to do, and I don't think the Krafts would do it either. Maybe they go to Will Greer, and that's their version of tanking. But regardless, in terms of selling off assets at the deadline, do you think right now they should make the decision, yes, let's start doing it, or do you think they should see how things go against the Bills, kick the can down there and see how that goes first?
I don't know. I'm conflicted. I can see the argument for both sides. I mean, I go back to the 2020 season with Cam Newton. They were 2-5, looked like a completely and totally lost season. Then they end up having a little midseason rally. They get back to 500 before obviously kind of losing steam down the stretch. Buffalo almost lost to the Giants on Sunday Night Football. The Patriots are going to be heavy underdogs in that game, but maybe there's a chance they pull off a win there. Maybe they pull off a miracle in Miami win there. I don't know. Maybe you prolong it for another week or two, but it wouldn't be surprising if that process gets going. I don't think they have a ton of obvious kind of desirable trade chips, but
they're all hitting free agency.
Yeah, Kendrick Bourne had a great game last night. Maybe you flip him to a contending team if you can get, I don't know, fourth round pick, fifth round pick for him, something like that. I think some of those contract year guys would be candidates. Owenu and Uche, but they're both dealing with injuries now. Kyle Duggar, but I don't think you can really get rid of a guy who's playing 100% of snaps for your defense. I don't know. It's not like they're flush with talent that a lot of teams around the NFL are going to be clamoring for. I think Bourne is the obvious one there. I don't know. Where do you sit on the kind of the sell question?
I think they have to do it. I agree with you that I don't think they're going to be able to get too much, and it is tricky because the guys that you would deal, I think dealing them would really torpedo what morale is remaining. For Mac Jones, dealing Kendrick Bourne, for him to in the span of 8 months lose Jacoby Myers and Kendrick Bourne, that'd be tough for him. And then guys like Kyle Duggar, Josh Uche, maybe Jonathan Jones. I think those are leaders on the team or really respected guys in the locker room, and I just think it would send the white flag signal to the team. So you have to always kind of balance that and the message it sends to fans, kind of like what the Red Sox have gone through the last couple of deadlines. But I think a story of this, a sidebar to this is, it's also a commentary on their failures at drafting, because in the past, you would have been able to move some of these guys before this point where you would have been able to get more. We were talking about this in the offseason. I thought they should have traded Kyle Duggar during the offseason because I think he's overrated. I think he's a good player, but I do think he's overrated. I think you're seeing it this year. He's not taking that jump. And I think he's the classic example of a player that the Patriots would go, someone else in the league is going to overvalue him. We don't think he's worth that. Trade him now, get something. We have somebody we drafted and developed who is ready to go. Or someone, that we got on the bargain bin who can kind of give us the same thing. They weren't able to do that because they're so thin they couldn't afford to subtract somebody like Kyle Duggar. And then the same situation with Josh Uche, where you should have been able to trade him ahead of time, recognize that he's not your kind of guy. Someone might overpay for him, but you have Anthony Jennings or Ronnie Perkins or whoever ready to go right away, so it doesn't really matter. Jonathan Jones, same thing. If Jack Jones or Marcus Jones looked like they were no doubt ready to go, pictures of your cornerback room, one, you probably don't have to pay Jonathan Jones in the offseason, or two, maybe you do trade him now. And now I don't know if you can. And you can just go that across the roster with stuff like that. Kendrick Bourne too, obviously, with the receiver situation. If they had drafted and developed players better than they have, they would have been in a position to deal some of these pending free agents earlier, which would net you better returns than you get when you deal them this late when you have no leverage. It's about the
also, side note there in terms of kind of replacing Kyle Duggar and building up that pipeline. 0 defensive snaps for Marte Mapu yesterday.
I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, I didn't until just now. I was like, I didn't remember seeing him on the field. Yeah, he played 14 snaps rather in the kicking game, no snaps on defense.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard some people criticizing those picks. I think I still have high expectations for a lot of those guys. I think we have to remind ourselves that for the most part, defensive rookies do not come in and play a lot for a Bill Belichick defense unless they absolutely have to. And especially when you're talking about a guy like that who's got such a weird role, I thought it was always going to be tough for him to see the role that we had maybe envisioned in training camp. But we'll see. Maybe if you deal someone like Jalen Mills, who's disgruntled over his playing time, or Adrian Phillips, and that's a guy who was a prime trade candidate too. But yeah, that is interesting that Mapu didn't play at all. I thought he did because at one point I saw him lined up on the sideline looking like he was going to go in, but I just didn't register. So it'll be interesting. Again, I think they have to do some sort of deadline selling off. I just don't know how all in they can go on it just for the message that it sends.
Final point I'll make on this. I know we're running long on time. We haven't seen it's been literal decades since the Patriots have had like a true lost season where you reach the trade deadline and they're 1-7 or 1-8 and saying, okay, there is no chance this team is making the playoffs. It's really hasn't happened since Bill Belichick's first season. Because as I mentioned, even the Cam Newton year, they made things interesting for a couple months or a couple weeks in November and December. So we don't really know. There's no real kind of playbook on how Bill Belichick is going to handle a situation like this. Is he going to go full sell mode? Is he going to say, no, look, I'm riding with this team. We're not waving the white flag. We're going to try to compete until the end of the year. It's just going to be fascinating because we don't have a precedent for it. And how much is his own job security going to be influenced by that? And yeah, it's uncharted territory for sure here.
Well, and is that decision even up to him at this point with all the talk of, is Robert Kraft going to strip him of his GM duties? I think you make an interesting point where they're in a situation where, we don't know how they'll react on multiple levels because they've never really been in it. Other franchises who've gone through struggles, with their ownership, we've seen how they sort of behave in those situations. We know the Cincinnati Bengals don't like to fire head coaches, right? But with the Patriots and Robert Kraft, how does he react in this kind of situation? Will he fire the head coach? Will he draw the line and say, no, you are losing GM duties? We haven't seen him put in this spot. And then similarly, how do they behave when they are in a clear position to sell the deadline? We've never seen it. There's no precedent. We don't know what they're going to do. So it will be fascinating to see how that goes. Real quick, wrapping up here, they're facing the Bills this weekend. The Bills are 4-2. I would also say I think they've been about what we thought before the season, where I think a lot of people thought they'd kind of regress and come back down to earth. I think that's borne out. That said, I think the path is here for the Bills to absolutely destroy the Patriots this weekend. But you can squint and see a competitive game if you consider like, hey, Patriots were in an impossible spot in the season finale last year with the whole Damar Hamlin thing, and they played a competitive game and had a chance to win if it wasn't for the 2 kick return touchdowns. And then, the Bills, they barely beat the Giants last night. They've had a couple other close games this year. They just don't look quite as good. They have some key injuries. I think there's a way for this game to be competitive depending on what kind of players are. I don't think anybody's going to pick them in their right mind. But what about you, Zach? Do you think they have a shot of winning this game?
I mean, I guess just based on what we've seen from the Bills this season, they're a little bit schizophrenic. Like some weeks they look like the best team in the NFL. Some weeks they either lose to the Jets or barely beat the Giants, 2 of the teams that I don't think anybody would call the best teams in the NFL. I am not going to be picking the Patriots in this game. They've only beaten the Bills once in the post Tom Brady era. That was in the win game back in 2021, where Mac Jones only attempted 3 passes. Stephon Diggs has killed them over the years. He's probably going to see a lot of J.C. Jackson in this game, whom he has killed over the years. It's really been a very negative matchup for the Patriots whenever those 2 guys go up against each other. I think they can keep it close. I'm interested to see if this offense can do anything against this Bills defense, which is going to be down at least 2 of its key players in Tre'Davious White and Matt Milano, both of whom are done for the season with injuries. There's, as you put it, you can squint and see a potential blueprint for a possible upset, but the Patriots just haven't really shown many reasons for optimism at all over these last couple of weeks.
Squinting. It's been a season of squinting for the Patriots. I feel like I've written or said, if you squint about this team like 50 times in the last month.
I can squint and see another close loss. I don't know if I can squint and see a victory. That's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, and I think, I do think this Bills defense is susceptible. But, who knows what Von Miller's going to be able to do, but they still have a good pass rush. And this just reeks of another game where the offensive line craters in front of the home crowd. Mac Jones gets sacked a lot, gets forced into a bad pick. The fans boo, like just pure apathy at the stadium. Like it just could be another rough day. It could be another rough day. And yeah, I guess we also should add there will be no Damian Harris revenge game in this one, just because he was hospitalized last night. I don't know if there's been any sort of details on that injury, but he looked like a head injury or something. Again, I was on
neck injury. Yeah, supposedly had movement in all of his extremities, so seemed like he avoided the kind of worst case scenario there. But yeah, it's certainly a scary situation, especially after everything the Bills already went through with Damar Hamlin last year.
Yeah. So yeah, unfortunately, he will not be able to play in this game. But we'll see what happens. I'm not picking the Patriots either. I don't think anybody in their right mind will. But we'll see. Maybe their backs are against the wall and they pull out a miracle. But you can follow us all week for more coverage on that game and the increasingly disastrous Patriots. You can follow me on X at Dak Randall and Zach on X at Zach Cox. NESN. God, I just hate having to say X that many times. And again, you can follow all of our Patriots coverage over at NESN.com.